But I thought it was hilarious because I really do have this problem where I will go to a store that has an automatic opening and it won't even acknowledge me. I just thought that that was a fun thing to put in the book. My character has no capacity to deal with technology at all, which is one of the themes in the book of him being someone who the world is trying to kick out. And while that's exaggerated, I mean, I really do use technology. My brain power to troubleshoot is zilch. I mean, if there is one thing that goes wrong, I have no ability to figure out how to do it. This is going to sound crazy and new agey. I do believe there are certain people who have something about them that cannot interact well with technology. And it's either something electronic or mental, but it's there.
Glad I don't have that problem. What factual cases of false light in the media intrigues you the most?
I think we're seeing an epidemic of it with cancel culture. It's interesting. My day job is running a crisis management firm where I have clients who are under attack, who are involved with controversies. And one of the things that's interesting is people tend to believe there is a law that prohibits the media from being unfair or inaccurate, when the fact is it is perfectly legal for the media to use false information about someone or something. There is no law that prevents that. What you're not allowed to do is knowingly fabricate information and put it out there, but that's very difficult to prove. I think we're seeing a lot of things independent of politics. I mean, if you are more liberal, you will believe that Trump and his family had ties to the Ku Klux Klan. If you are more conservative, you will believe that Obama was born in Kenya. I think it's very easy with the internet to circulate stuff like that because, I mean, I'm 58 years old. During the earlier part of my life, up until recently, if you wanted to spread a rumor about the Dark and Stormy Book Club, a reporter would say, well, how do you know that the women who run that are serial killers? How do you know that? And I would say, I don't really know that, so I guess you're not going to run with the story. Now what I do is I get on Twitter. I just say it, and then I force you to deny it. I think this is now a permanent feature of our landscape, the capacity to ruin people or hurt people and get away with it. I just think we're just at the beginning of all of this, and it doesn't matter what your politics are. Everybody is susceptible. There's also no real difference between somebody like Harvey Weinstein, who I think we all would agree is a monster and a rapist, and somebody like Al Franken, who during his days as a comedian did something a bit crude. Well, both get ruined. And should that be the case? This is a question that we're all asking ourselves.
Yeah, I often say that I'm really happy that as a teenager, I grew up without all this technology because I really feel bad for younger people. Bullying has taken on a whole nother face.
Well, that's right. I mean, it used to be kind of intimate. I mean, when I grew up, again, as a kid in New Jersey in a mob neighborhood, bullying was not something that happened from time to time. It happened every day. I don't know what I would have done if somebody who didn't like me spread some rumor that I did something horrible. There's no way to get that back. I mean, I was contacted by someone a few months ago whose child was accepted to a very competitive school. Somebody else who was vying for that position, presumably, sent a videotape to the admissions office of the first kid who was singing a rap song at a party, and that rap song had certain lyrics that most of us don't particularly enjoy saying. And the university reversed the decision. They didn't want to accept a racist. That begs the question, is a kid singing a rap song? I mean, I didn't have rap songs when I was growing up, but I certainly, not everything that I did as a teenager was brilliant. I wouldn't want to be ruined by something like that. And now this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Exactly. There are kids who are walking around with being sexual predators just because they said the wrong thing to a girl and she reported it. So called it for life.
Well, that's right. I know that I was doing some work with a university and I called the client into the other room. My understanding is your policy of sexual assault, because there's no national law that defines sexual assault. It's case by case, it's location by location. And I said, is it true that at your university, let's say a guy and a girl are together, guy puts his hand somewhere, girl says no, and he says, I hear you, and he complies. a sexual assault has still taken place. And
Right.
the university person said, yes, that's our rule. And I said, well, you're going to have a lot of sexual assaults under that definition. You're going to have a lot of people whose lives are ruined based on that. We're all establishing the rules, and I'm not the one who is going to set the rule. But one of the reasons why I dealt with the theme of sexual assault in the book, I wanted to throw out there the danger of being in ambiguous situations, as opposed to, this Pacho guy is not someone who jumped out of the bushes wearing a black mask. This is somebody who had a situation that initially could have seemed quite consensual, and then it turned into something else. And it's those type of ambiguities that really make the age that we're navigating pretty scary.
The thought that Samantha would have had to spend her life being the victim.
In the media.
That's right. And when I was writing this book, I was well aware that I am a straight, white, middle-aged man, and nobody is really that interested in what I think of these issues. And the book, while it's not a meditation on Me Too, I was worried about getting it right. And I called a friend of mine who is an activist and rape survivor, and I said, what do I do to get this as right as possible? And she gave me great advice. She said, number one, don't even attempt to be the guy who gets it. You can't, so don't try. Number two, if revenge for this assault is pursued, don't make it seem like everything is solved by revenge. And the third thing she said is, we know what the dad in the book gets out of this, revenge, but what does she get out of it? And I called my friend about a year later and I said, I finally figured it out. I have an experience you don't have. I'm a dad. I'm a parent. When you have a problem with a child that you cannot for the life of you solve with your money, with your brains, with your resources, what do? And the only thing I've come up with is you love your kid. I think while this doesn't ruin the book for anybody, I think the one thing that Samantha knows by the end is that her problem has not been solved, but man, people really do love her. That's all really she got. She still has to deal with this problem, but it took me a while to come up with that. And I'm glad that I had the prodding and guidance of somebody who knew a lot more about this than I did.
I absolutely love the name, The Callous Sophisticates. I was like, I want to be a member of that group.
Well, it's a name that stuck with me since the 70s. There was a cartoonist named Ap Kleban who wrote these cartoons that were like The Far Side, and one of them was referred to as the Callous Sophisticates, and it was these drawings of these horribly pretentious people laughing at some other poor woman. I just thought the Callous Sophisticates was a great name that I had to use. It only took me more than 40 years, but I finally was able to call Fuse's gang in this book, the Callous Sophisticates. I don't know, it makes me laugh even talking about it.
I would like to make a suggestion that if you do continue this series, that should be the name of the series.
I love it. If we can sell enough books, I'll do exactly that.
Was he the one that drew the cats?
That's exactly right.
Okay, I know what you're talking about them. As much as this is a story of revenge, it's also a story of how far a friend will go for another person. What compelled you to slant the book towards the angle of friendship?
Well, the book idea began with the question that I mentioned at the top of the segment, which is what happens when a guy who's gotten away with everything his whole life finds himself on the receiving end of somebody just like him? Here you have Fuse, a guy who life has beaten up, and you have his best friend, Kurt Rossiter, Samantha's father. And this is a guy who's gone through life with a tailwind. One of the things that I have noticed at the age that I am is I'm amazed by how unequal the world is, that some people really do have it easier than other people. And a lot of what I was challenged by in this book, this relationship where Fuse does resent Kurt for how easily his life has gone. But given what happens to Kurt's daughter and Fuse's goddaughter, for the first time in their 50-something years, Fuse sees a vulnerability in this guy and ceases to resent him and wants to help him. And the only way that I could think of to humble Kurt was not have him have a career setback or something like that, but to have something happen with his child. I believe what Fuse is willing to do for him is an awful lot. But also, one of the subtexts in the book is Fuse has a daughter of his own. And he's very worried about his daughter, who is a teenager and is not very interested in him. What is going to happen to her when she goes out in the world? So Fuse taking vengeful action against a sexual predator is not just him helping his friend and his goddaughter. It is his way of dealing with his powerlessness. It's his way of saying to the outside world, my kid is going to be becoming part of the outside world, and I want you all to know I'm watching. That is one of the challenges of his feeling obsolete, a loss of power in his career, a loss of power to protect his child.
I liked the relationship between the two friends. It was real true to life to me. With one having a little more than the other, you could see why Fuse would have been just, a little bit jealous.
Yes, and I think that in order to be honest about things, if you were to ask me, is Fuse jealous of Kurt? The socially correct answer would be no, he's happy for him. But you know and I know that's not how the world works. On one hand, yes, he doesn't really want his friend to suffer. But on the other hand, he would like him to know a little bit about what it's like. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we all have a bit of that in us. And I think because you write about mysteries, you're obviously interested in the darker side of human nature. I have always been interested in the things about ourselves that we know to be true, but would never admit. I mean, if you ask somebody, are you greedy? No, I'm not greedy. But most of us think, wow, wouldn't it be great to win the lottery? I know I do.
Definitely.
One of the things I really liked in the book was the friendship between that group, that they were friends when they were kids and they just stayed together.
When I first wrote the book, a lot of it was set, and still some of it is set in 1975 when they were in junior high. I know that it's amazing to me and a little embarrassing how much I think of those years. And a lot of the book contains the songs that were popular in the mid-1970s. And there are these flashbacks and silly things such as Fuse still has this irrational crush on one of their friends. And even though he's married to his childhood sweetheart and it's a happy marriage, he thinks he's going nuts because he's in his 50s and he's looking at this now middle-aged woman who he's thinking about how he still had a crush on her when they were in junior high. And the fact is they have absolutely nothing in common. But that's the nature of crushes. They're completely irrational. They make no sense. They're not good for you, yet we have them. The idea of constantly retreating into the mid-70s is something I think a lot of us do and wonder if we could have relived it in some different way, even though on an intellectual level, we know it's a waste of time thinking like that.
Well, it's all in our heads, so.
Yeah.
Eric, are you working on anything else at the moment?
Not actively. I mean, I tend to sketch out other ideas, and there was a murder in my neighborhood growing up in New Jersey in the early 70s that I have been tinkering with doing something with it, but I haven't figured it out yet. My other novels tend to deal with organized crime in some capacity. One of the characters in False Light that is most like a real character is the drug lord. He's based on a friend of mine who was able to retire from being a Philadelphia gangster. He's a fascinating character to me because very few people walk out of that world alive. And this is a guy who just decided it's dangerous, it's wrong, I hate it, and he's going to walk away. And he did it and he survived. I'm trying to figure out if I could work that into this murder story, but I don't know whether I'm going to be able to pull it off, but I would like to.
Definitely keep us posted if you do, because our listeners love a good true crime.
I do too, and I grew up enough around it and saw how it does and how it doesn't work. The myth and reality of gangland, it's always fun to talk about worlds that are based somewhat in truth.
Yeah. Well, can you let our listeners know your website so they can learn more about you and your books?
Sure. It's www.dezbooks.net. So it's D-E-Z books, dezbooks.net.
Well, Eric, we thank you for taking time to talk with us. This is one book we highly recommend. It was very, very well done. and I'm hoping there's another installment coming sometime. If you do,